But, like, it is another situation than pretending like Caitlin Clark doesn't exist.
They want to make the trajectory look like it's going up and not down. It's whatever, man. We see what's going on.
They're trying to make it so that the data looks as favorable as possible.
ESPN didn't want to show the ratings were down from WNBA All-Star game because Caitlin Clark didn't play, so they just used the 2023 numbers instead.
ESPN lying again.
ESPN just got exposed for blatantly twisting the truth about WNBA All-Star game ratings in a desperate attempt to cover up the brutal fallout from Caitlin Clark's absence. And the cover-up was so sloppy, even their own journalists couldn't stay quiet, publicly calling out the network for pushing a misleading narrative. After the 2025 All-Star game in Indianapolis suffered a brutal 36% ratings nosedive, from 3.4 million viewers in 2024 down to just 2.2 million, ESPN chose to completely skip over last year's record-setting number. Instead, they compared the game to 2023 to manufacture the illusion of growth that simply didn't exist. If you believe Caitlin Clark is the only superstar in the WNBA, then comment needle mover. Let's go.
Yes, you guys heard me correctly. The numbers are in. And just like I told you, there was a boycott.
You got to understand, these numbers, they did like 2 million viewers. That's up from 2023. 2023 was a little over 900,000. So it is up. So the numbers are going up. But compared to last year, it fell by 40%.
Oh, so they going to try to spin it. Okay, it could be the second most watched of all time. Of course, it's going to be that, but compared to last year, you still down 36%.
What makes ESPN's statistical gymnastics even more absurd is where the game was held, right in Caitlin Clark's home arena in Indianapolis. This was supposed to be a WNBA celebration unlike any other, the biggest stage in the league, hosted in the city of its biggest star. But instead of a historic triumph, it turned into a ratings disaster so embarrassing that ESPN tried to spin it into a success story through pure deception.
They're just skewing data. They're just skewing data.
So it's up 158% compared to 23. What happened to 24? Y'all just gonna skip over 24? Like, what?
Thing is, you know, this could be disingenuous too. That's the bad side of it, because for some reason they have a thing where they want to compare everything without Caitlin. They're like, oh, well, you know, she's an anomaly, so we could compare these numbers to 2023 and show you that without Caitlin, it's growing.
This is very similar to the WNBA draft, comparing it to 2023. Very similar to how they are presenting this graph.
The injury that triggered this whole mess happened on July 15th, when Clark aggravated a lingering groin issue during Indiana's win over Connecticut. Within hours of her announcement that she'd be sitting out All-Star weekend, ticket prices imploded, dropping 48% from $121 down to just $64. And that crash wasn't hypothetical. It was fans saying loud and clear, "Without Caitlin Clark, we're not interested." This wasn't a small dip or a minor hiccup for the league. This was a full-on economic collapse that laid bare how much the WNBA's fortunes hinge on one 23-year-old superstar. It's especially jarring considering this has been Clark's most injury-plagued season to date. Missing 10 regular season games after going her entire college and rookie career without sitting out once. Can mainstream networks ever be trusted when they've got money tied up in the leagues they cover?
So for all the people that thought that it wasn't a boycott against this All-Star game, it was, bro. People was just DMing me, telling me that they wasn't going to look at it. People was telling me that they refunded their tickets. I was even supposed to be there, and I decided not to go because of the things with the referees and the WNBA disrespecting Caitlin.
1,250,000 viewers, woof, out of existence. No Caitlin Clark, not tuning in.
You don't have to look far to see ESPN's sleight of hand in action. Just take a closer look at how they sculpted their so-called historic rating success. They didn't just omit the 2024 benchmark, they carefully selected data from 2023, a time when Clark hadn't even gone pro yet, and the WNBA was barely registering on the average sports fan's radar. Rather than tell the truth, that ratings dropped by over 1 million people year over year, ESPN chose to plaster their social media and press releases with a misleading stat. That 2025 was up 158% from 2 years ago. That wasn't a mistake. That was a deliberate PR move to manipulate the narrative and distract from the damage Clark's absence caused.
So all of you guys can sit there and say, oh, you guys are just trying to uplift one player. Oh, the league is more than one. I agree, the league is more than one player. It's more than one good basketball player. But is there more than one player that moves the tide? No. We just have to be honest. It's okay.
And what really gives away the game is ESPN's sudden change of tone. All season long, they've credited Clark for driving record growth, selling out arenas, and putting the WNBA on the map. But when the All-Star game tanked without her, suddenly it's like no individual player matters. They even tried to pivot attention to Friday night's skills challenge and three-point contest, which pulled in 1.3 million viewers, an 89% jump from last year. But they left out one key detail. Those numbers had everything to do with format tweaks and primetime scheduling, not some magical surge in overall league interest. The bump had nothing to do with Reese, Wilson, or whoever ESPN tried to prop up, and everything to do with fans still holding on to hope that Clark might appear.
There is fans that are just Caitlin Clark fans. I said this yesterday. If Caitlin Clark was to lead to go to New York or any other damn team, expect significant impact in the Indiana Fever viewership, bro. People might tune in for that first season without Caitlin if she was to leave, but after that, it is over with.
There was plenty of people I saw online who said, yo, Caitlin Clark not playing. Oh, she's hurt and they don't want to call fouls. Okay, I'm not giving them a view. I'm not going to watch. There was plenty of people that boycotted watching this WNBA All-Star game.
But this fallout wasn't limited to the television screen. Clark's exit from All-Star Weekend triggered a domino effect that hammered every corner of the WNBA's business. From ticketing revenue to merchandise sales to the valuation of sponsorship deals, the market reacted like it had lost its center of gravity. ESPN's smoke and mirrors routine couldn't hide what fans were seeing with their own eyes. The 48% ticket price plunge wasn't just some slight dip. It was a full-on consumer rebellion from people who had paid to watch Caitlin Clark and had no interest in watching anyone else take her place.
You can see when Caitlin doesn't play, it happens. And how are we meant to know that if Caitlin ends up missing a year, Caitlin's gone, that all those fans don't just leave again?
They know they need Caitlin Clark to grow this league, man.
And it wasn't just about empty seats. Social media turned into a flood of fan cancellations. People publicly posted about scrapping travel plans, offloading their tickets, and skipping the broadcast entirely. The WNBA didn't just lose numbers, they lost momentum. And this wasn't some fringe reaction. It was a massive, visible fan boycott that ESPN desperately tried to bury by cooking the numbers. Why? To keep corporate sponsors and advertisers from panicking over what the WNBA looks like without its top attraction.
Why not just not put up 153? Just say 2.2 million average viewers and then just say second most watched All-Star game ever behind 2024, which is fine. You don't even have to say how down bad it is. It's a PR page.
Instead of trying to down Caitlin Clark and diminish her to the level that other people may be at, why don't you promote the other people alongside of Caitlin Clark's greatness?
The financial fallout from Caitlin Clark's injury didn't stop at the arena gates. It rippled across Indianapolis, hammering every local business that had geared up for a Clark-fueled tourism spike. Hotels, restaurants, and retail stores had banked on a flood of out-of-town visitors and Fever fans. Many had stocked up on Indiana Fever merchandise specifically for this weekend. But when Clark was ruled out, the crowds thinned, the momentum stalled, and ESPN's coverage? It brushed right past that broader economic hit, choosing instead to highlight cherry-picked stats that downplayed the full extent of the damage. Worse yet, Clark's absence didn't just reveal her value. It exposed a glaring void across the rest of the league. Nafisa Collier dropped 36 points and walked away with All-Star MVP honors, but the needle barely moved. There was no surge in viewership, no buzz, no viral moments. That silence said it all. The WNBA still hasn't cultivated another player who can hold the national spotlight the way Clark can. And that's not just a player development problem. It's a league-wide branding failure.
Caitlin Clark was in it. We're going to say it's up on non-Caitlin Clark numbers because, you know, Caitlin Clark's just an anomaly. Caitlin Clark's not a player. Caitlin Clark is not relevant to this. Caitlin Clark is an anomaly.
Y'all are trying to straddle the fence. We want your money, but we don't want you. Which one is it? Which one is it? We want the viewership, but we only want viewership from certain people's fans. We want the ratings up, but We don't want these type of, like, no, do you want it or not? You got to accept what comes with everything, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Meanwhile, the backlash against ESPN's narrative spin came fast and loud. Legendary journalist Christine Brennan took to social media to call out the network's deceptive framing, questioning why ESPN would promote historic ratings when, in reality, the numbers were down sharply from the year before. Her tweet went viral, exposing ESPN's statistical gymnastics to an even wider audience. It wasn't just fans calling them out. It was respected media voices drawing the line between optimism and outright misrepresentation. Then came Austin Karp from Sports Business Journal, who dropped the hammer with context ESPN refused to touch. He laid it out clearly. Anything Caitlin Clark touches turns to gold, and when she's gone, the numbers tank. The 36% drop in All-Star viewership wasn't a fluke. It was part of a consistent pattern. Karp documented multiple events where Clark's absence led to steep declines, building an undeniable case for the WNBA's total dependency on her. And ESPN's refusal to acknowledge it? That's not just spin. It's a conscious decision to deceive the public and protect their business interests.
Now, many other people stated that, you know what? It was sold out. It was not a boycott. Well, you know the old saying, men lie, women lie, and the numbers don't. This is a case of the numbers not lying.
By choosing to compare this year's All-Star numbers to 2023, ESPN effectively admitted what they won't say out loud. There are two distinct WNBA eras, pre-Clark and post-Clark. These are separate realities with completely different audience expectations, engagement levels, and commercial viability. Using 2023 as a benchmark, when Clark was still in college and the WNBA struggled to draw 1 million viewers, was an intentional move to hide the true scope of this year's collapse. The contrast only underscores the fact that the WNBA's current visibility and financial strength are overwhelmingly tied to one player. It's the kind of truth ESPN is afraid to put on the record, especially in front of sponsors and investors.
I believe that it's everything also leading up to this. I mean, talk about leading up to this. The officiating, I think enough fans had it up to here with the league as a whole. People had it up to here. You got to understand. Caitlin Clark is getting beat up in these games. The refs aren't calling anything. Kathy Engelbert seems to have air between both of her ears. She seems to have pure air floating between her ears. And I think people are fed up.
Even more damning? ESPN spent the entire season crediting Clark for exploding viewership, boosting attendance, and lifting the league's profile. But when the numbers cratered in her absence, suddenly individual players didn't matter anymore. That contradiction undermines everything they've been saying. If star power isn't relevant, why spend months promoting Clark as the face of the WNBA? It's selective storytelling that collapses under its own hypocrisy. And then there's the bigger picture. Because this doesn't just hurt the league's image, it undercuts the players' financial future. WNBA athletes are currently in the middle of critical collective bargaining negotiations, where TV ratings are a key factor in arguing for higher pay. Those "pay us what you owe us" warm-up shirts weren't just a slogan. They were a direct response to the league's refusal to share the growing pie. But ESPN's manipulation sabotaged that argument. By hiding the 36% drop, they presented a false image of stability and sustained growth that undercuts players' leverage. Clark and others have pointed to rising viewership as justification for increased compensation. But ESPN's version of events makes it look like nothing's changed, when in reality, everything changed the moment Clark couldn't play.
And what led up to this whole situation is the WNBA referees not giving Caitlin Clark a fair whistle. The whistle played into facts when it comes to this WNBA All-Star game. I don't give a damn how people try to spin it, cut it. You cannot cut the facts. And the facts is the WNBA All-Star game was a disaster before it even started.
This timing raises serious ethical concerns. ESPN isn't just a broadcaster, they're a stakeholder. Their money is in the game. And when their coverage shapes how millions of dollars are distributed, from player salaries to sponsorship contracts, that becomes a conflict of interest. Sponsors base investments on audience size and engagement. By manipulating those numbers, ESPN isn't just lying to fans. They're misleading the very corporations funding the league. And this isn't just a WNBA problem. ESPN's behavior reveals a broader issue with how corporate-owned media covers sports they're financially entangled with. It's journalism in name only, corporate messaging disguised as news. When a network is willing to skew something as basic as viewership data to protect its own investments, it calls into question the credibility of everything else they report. Fans begin to doubt, sponsors begin to worry, and athletes get stuck in the crossfire of a media machine more concerned with spin than truth.
So many of you have probably been waiting on this, as have I. But the WNBA All-Star game ratings have come out, and all I could think of right off the bat was 4 little letters. F-A-F-O. F around and find out.
What's even more telling is that ESPN was willing to risk long-term credibility just to shield the WNBA from one tough news cycle. That short-sightedness damages trust, not just in their WNBA coverage, but across their entire sports portfolio. And the fans noticed. Social media erupted with accusations of spin, data cherry-picking, and narrative control. Viewers are catching on, and they're not interested in being sold a version of reality that doesn't match what they see with their own eyes. That erosion of trust is a long-term problem ESPN can't afford. Once fans start doubting your stats, your analysis, and your integrity, you lose the very audience that advertisers and sponsors rely on. And it creates a feedback loop. Less trust leads to lower engagement, which makes the league less attractive, which weakens ESPN's WNBA investment. In the end, ESPN might damage the very property they were trying to protect. Worse, they risk feeding the belief that women's sports aren't covered honestly, that they're more vulnerable to corporate manipulation than their male counterparts.
You bleep around and find out what this league looks like without Caitlin Clark being involved in your biggest events. Kathy Engelbert, this should be a perfect example of why you need to get your officiating cleaned up and you need to have a talk with your players in the league. And nobody's asking you to hold Caitlin Clark's hand. Just play fair.
And here's where it gets international. The WNBA is actively looking to expand beyond U.S. borders. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has talked up global games, overseas partnerships, and new broadcasting deals. But if the league's primary media partner is cooking its books, how can any international partner trust the numbers? Foreign media execs are savvy. They know how to read ratings trends, and ESPN's gamesmanship doesn't just jeopardize trust domestically, it raises red flags for anyone evaluating whether the league is worth backing globally. Even worse, ESPN's deception puts their own ad revenue at risk. Companies buying airtime during WNBA broadcasts are operating on faulty assumptions. They're being sold on numbers that don't tell the full story, especially when Clark isn't on the court. If those advertisers realize they've been misled, they could start pulling money, demanding refunds, or renegotiating contracts based on more realistic and less Clark-dependent metrics. That hurts not just ESPN's WNBA revenue, but also their reputation with sponsors across the board.
You see, this is exactly what we were talking about. WNBA All-Star ratings are in for 2025, and it is down 40%. 40% from last year. That's bad. That is really bad. We already watched the ticket prices drop by more than 50% because Caitlin Clark was not playing. This is bad news for the WNBA, and this should be a wake-up call.
And in the streaming era, there's no hiding from the truth. Platforms like ESPN Plus and Disney Plus track every click, every minute viewed, every exit. That data doesn't lie. It shows how long fans stuck around, when they dropped off, and what happened when Clark wasn't involved. Unlike traditional ratings, these metrics can't be massaged. They're brutally honest, and likely show even bigger drop-offs when Clark is absent. So while ESPN plays games with broadcast ratings, the digital numbers are quietly exposing an even bigger problem. Viewer loyalty is tied almost entirely to one player. This only increases the pressure on ESPN to keep pushing false narratives. Because if they admit how dependent the league is on Clark, they also have to admit their entire women's sports strategy may be built on unstable ground. That kind of admission doesn't just scare advertisers. It could rattle investors and even impact Disney's valuation. At the end of the day, ESPN's attempt to rewrite the All-Star Weekend story tells us everything we need to know. Even they don't believe the WNBA can stand on its own without Caitlin Clark. And that's the real red flag. If ESPN, who has the most riding on the league's success, won't tell the truth about its dependency on a single superstar, then why should sponsors, fans, or even players buy into the hype? Because real growth doesn't require deception. And Caitlin Clark doesn't need ESPN to fake the numbers. Her impact speaks for itself. If you believe Caitlin Clark is the only superstar in the WNBA, then comment needle mover, like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss out. Click the video on the screen, and we will see you in the next one.